The 8.6 update is quite substantial. Many changes are being made to the game mechanics and the in-game economy. Artillery will be receiving an overhaul, and a new map is being added. This review should help clarify a few of the finer points of the upcoming changes. Global adjustments were made to the SPG branches. They were expanded to the 10th tier. The top artillery preserved their status. All of the Tier 8 SPGs were transferred to the 10th. Many of the other vehicles were also transferred to a higher tier, and the SPG branches in their old places have been occupied with new vehicles. The new Soviet SPGs have been introduced at Tier 5, the Su-122A, and at Tier 7, the Su-14-1. The G-Panzer Mark VI now occupies German Tier 2. Tier 4 has the Panzer SFL-4B, and Tier 8 has the GW Tiger P. The American SPG branch now has the M44 at Tier 6, and the M53-M55 was placed at 9th tier. The French Tier 4 SPG is now home to the AMX-105 AM MLE-47, and Tier 9 has gone to the Bat-Chatillon 155-55. The firepower of these vehicles matches that of their peers. But these are not all of the changes made to artillery. Shell travel speed has been reduced by 10 to 15% for ordinary cannons and up to 50% for mortars. In conjunction, the reload time was increased by 10 to 20% in most cases. Some vehicles have had their mobility modified. The overall increase was put in place to compensate for the increased accuracy given to SPGs. A new premium Tier 5 tank was added to the shop, the A-33 Excelsior. This tank has decent armoring and definitely good mobility, and the rapid-firing cannon lets you deal with enemies very quickly. The update also brings a new map, Sacred Valley. The main features of this map are the numerous routes for assaulting the opposing force. The map has many lone buildings and 3 big villages, but it will still be difficult to hide from artillery fire. Almost all of the buildings are breakable, and the positions behind the mountains lead you open to attacks from other tanks. The best tactic here is to assault under the enemy base. The middle of the map has a valley that is poorly covered by artillery. You can take cover from enemy fire there. The C3 point allows for control of most of the map, but it's a difficult position to hold. A good road for slow heavy tanks is located behind a hill on G8H7. The hill will provide protection for your flank, and the whole road has plenty of cover, like buildings and various terrain profile. Sacred Valley's landscape features allow active combat actions for any type of vehicle. Apart from the new map, 3 well-known maps have been reworked to make use of the improved graphics renderer. Morovanka has become gray and grim. Some minor details were added, but the map will feel familiar. Airfield has become more deserted. Dangerous cliffs, sandy villages, and a falcon in the sky add to the atmosphere. Wide Park received the most significant changes. The central part of the map had a total makeover. The easy slopes make it harder to battle under the mound, but there's a derailed train on the map now. It can be used as an excellent cover from both sides. The lower base has had a large building removed. It's now much more open. The base crossing can now be spotted as easily as the one on top. There are 4 arches under the bridge now, 2 of which are covered by dense vegetation. Overall, the map has become more beautiful with lots of minor details. The Fjords map was also changed. The lake in the middle can now be used for assault and flanking the enemy. This is true for both sides. The assault mode has returned for the Westfield map. The base was moved to the bottom of the village and the bridge was repaired. It can now be crossed. Mines, Lakeville, and Redshire maps now have encounter mode. The dispersion mechanism has been changed when calculating a shot's accuracy. Shells will travel to the edge of the aiming circle 20% less and will be more likely to go to the circle's center. The mechanisms for calculating armor penetration and damage were also changed. The maximum and minimum values will happen roughly 5% less. You will have decreased numbers of misses and cases of not penetrating. You can now be sure that you're more likely to hit or destroy your opponent. Vehicles with a weight over 70 tons now have the option for a new super heavy spall liner that absorbs an additional 30% damage. The medium and large spall liners now absorb 20% and 25% respectively. The normalization for all composite rigid shells was reduced from 5 to 2 degrees. It will be harder to get a penetrating hit. The heat shells now work in a way closer to their real-life counterparts. When a shell hits a spaced armor or track, it will begin to lose its armor penetration with a rate of -5% of the total penetration value for every 10 centimeters traveled after piercing the spaced armor. Meaning the shell will lose 50% of its penetration after traveling beyond the spaceplate if it's 1 meter to the main armor. The armor penetration was reduced for heat shells on most high-tier tanks and middle-tier tanks with high-caliber cannons. In addition, high-explosive AT shells can now ricochet. As a result, armor has become more important. Vehicles such as the Maus, the E-100, or the T-95 will get a noticeable bonus. It will be much harder to penetrate their armor. The camouflage calculation mechanism has also changed. The effectiveness of hiding behind bushes has been reduced a bit, but the camouflage net and paint now provide a fixed bonus that doesn't depend on the size of the vehicle. Formerly, they were almost useless for large tank destroyers, such as the JAG-D Panzer E-100, but now they can be effectively used. High-tier tanks have received an increase in profit. The Tier 10 vehicles get an increase of about 10%, except for SPGs. The Tier 6, 7, 8, and 9 vehicles get less. The TDs and SPGs have had their decreasing coefficients removed for calculations determining experience and credits earned through damage caused. Now TDs will receive 30% more experience and SPGs will get 50% more. A bonus for knocking tracks off has been introduced. When a player immobilizes an enemy vehicle and the allies do damage to it with the tracks blown off, that player will receive additional experience. The calculation algorithm is the same one as for calculating the spotting damage experience. Premium shell costs have changed. The effectiveness of every ammunition type is calculated based on its armor penetration and damage. Then the price was set according to the effectiveness. The cost of some composite rigid shells was increased, while some became cheaper. The price on most heat shells was increased because they were cheaper than the composite rigid shells of the same effectiveness. Prices for most premium high explosive shells remain the same. The game improvements were not only visual, the audio has been touched up as well. The maps now have more objects with individual sounds. You can hear far-off cannon shots more clearly. New sounds for shell hits have been introduced. These changes add to the game's atmosphere. The sniper aiming mode now has the option to compensate for your tank's movement. The aim has been stabilized and doesn't jump with the tank, when moving over a railroad, for example. This mode is enabled by toggling the Use Dynamic Camera via the Options menu. The tier parameters for different classes in tank companies have been rebalanced. The maximum level requirements are now the same for heavy tanks, medium tanks, SPGs, and TDs. That's all for this 8.6 review. Fare you well until the next update. Roll out!